Daf Lamed Bet Amud Aleph, 37 lines down, second wide line. Tenura Bet Hekvarot Lot Tamila. If someone's a Kohen and he sees the item in the cemetery, he shouldn't get it. Tenabran. Minayin Shim Amar Lot Aviv. How do you know that? How do you know if a Kohen's father told him, hit Tameh, become Tameh and get the lost object? Or She Amar Lo Al Tahzir. If he said, take the item but don't return it. Both Yisrei Doraita. Shalo Yishmael. How do you know he should not listen to his father? The Pasuk says, Shinamar, the Pasuk says, Ish Immo Ba'aviv Tira'u V'Shabbatai Tishmoru. You shall honor your parents, but you shall also keep my Shabbat. Ani Hashem, I am God, which means you, your father, and everybody else is also in Hayav to listen to me, God. Therefore, your father tells you to violate, you don't listen. Sounds like the reason why the father must not listen to the father and still return the item or not become tamid because it should take more because it says you have to keep my Shabbat, I am Hashem, therefore listen to God. But had it not been that you would you have to listen to your father over God? You listen to him. But why would you think that the mitzvah to obey your father is a mitzvah to a positive commandment? But let's say the mitzvah of tum'ah, or sorry, the mitzvah of hashtavidas, na'aseh and lo ta'aseh. Don't hide your eyes and make sure you return it. Why would the aseh of your father push off the aseh and lo ta'aseh, the positive and the negative commandments, for hashtavidah? Right, it's necessary. You might think just like we know that the honoring your parents is compared to the honoring of God. Pasuk says honor your parents, but elsewhere it says honor God's property. Maybe you might think you have to listen to your father, even when it's against Hashem. The Torah says don't listen to him. Next part. Mitzvah Mitzvah is to unload the animal that's collapsing, but not to reload it. My avaloton doesn't mean there's no mitzvah to load it. Either my avaloton clause means there's no mitzvah to load it at all. My shna preka, why is unloading such a big mitzvah? Because it says you have to help him. But also loading, also says hakim also help him. So both of them seemingly have a commandment. The says the doraita to help unload the animal you should do it for free. But to load it, you're not for free. You could demand payment to reload it. Rabbi Shimon says even to reload is also for free, like we saw earlier. It says Braita says you have to unload for free, but you could reload for payment. And Rabbi Shimon both of them are for free. Why do they each hold that? My time at if you hold like Rabbi Shimon is do for free, you should only mention loading. You don't need to teach me unloading at all. I'll prove for myself. Just like loading. There's no suffering of the animal. No monetary loss if I don't help the guy reload. You don't need to teach me unloading because in that case, there's the animal suffering. The owner is losing money. If the animal dies, again. So for sure, you'd have to be doing it. And then I like so why did Torah teach you both? Why teach you? Unloading is free and loading is payment. That is hachamim. So Rabbi Shimon might tell us how can Rabbi Shimon hold both have free? Because the pasukim are not clear. Which one means which? Where it says Rabbanan, how did Hachami answer that? Why would you say that's not conclusive? It's easy. Over here it's saying the animal is lying down because of the burden, which means you need to unload it. Over there it says it's falling. It's not both the animals and the items on the floor. You have to help them load it. Rabbi Shimon says no, even in the case of falling, it's also the animal is lying down with the item on top because it's collapsing. Maybe that pasuk is also talking about unloading. That's why he says it's not clear. Okay. Amar says, we see from both. We see that the concept of the animal suffering is the oraita. That you can't let animals suffer. The reason why Rabbi Shimon said that right, both cases of loading and unloading is because it was inconclusive. Otherwise, had the Pasukim had been conclusive to assist to differentiate and discern which one's which. Darshina Kavachomer, he wouldn't be able to learn the Kavachomer. Mishum Mai, because why? Because the concept of Tzar B'Chaim would have been legitimately being able to be expounded from the other. Meaning, you can learn, according to this Havamina, that maybe Rabbi Shimon would agree that it's the Raita. And in the case of unloading, is Doraita Tzari B'Chaim. So for sure, in the case that there is none, you'd also have to, if in the case where there's no Tzari B'Chaim by loading, then for sure in the case where the animal is suffering by unloading, you for sure have to do it. Gemara said not a good proof. Maybe it is a monetary loss. If the guy doesn't help unload the animal might die. The Hidush is the following by the Kavachomer. Umatina by case of loading, the like by Hasan is no loss, but you don't help him load it. Hayav Hayav, Perika, unloading. By Hasan case, the animal can die, and therefore the owner might lose money. Lokosh again, for sure you have to help him. Therefore, no Kavachomer to show that Rabbi Shimon holds of Sarah Chaim Zuraita. Itina better Machizgis, and you're not seeing that. 1 second. Even loading, you can have a loss of money. You could talk about a case where if he doesn't get to the marketplace, his item is not going to sell, or people might steal it. Maybe the case is of loading also, and therefore maybe the only differentiation between loading and unloading is Tzar B'Chaim Doraita or not. Where he's okay, tell that Tzar B'Chaim Doraita really Tzar B'Chaim, the suffering of animals, is Doraita. And I see we see in the Mishnah. If the animal had more than it could carry, en zakuklo, you don't have to help it. Shenemar pasuk says, tahat masao, under the burden, masao but only if it's a burden that it should usually normally carry. Lav michlal, that sounds like the Tanaka Masavar, the Achmim and Rishmon argue against him. That say what? Zakuklo, my time away, have to help him. Lav mishum zarabim right there. Only because it's tzarabachim, you have to help the animal, it's suffering, and it's the raita. Rashi says no. Dilma, betah masao pligi. Machlok is only, how do you explain that word, tah masao, under its burden? Basically, basically holds it's under the burden means only it's a burden that the animal can stand. Therefore, if it's oversized, you're patur. Don't learn that, and therefore Hamim don't understand that, and Rishon would hold that even if it's not you still have to help. Not bring people that everybody holds it's not the right. The first part of Mishnah said, if the owner was being nasty and he walked away and said, okay, help me unload the animal. Lamar law, since you have to unload my animal, do by yourself and I'm not going to help. Patur, you don't have to help him because Pasuk says you have to help with him. Which shows what's the difference if the guy's helping you or not? If it's Doraita, to make sure animals don't suffer, if the guy's not helping you, you still have a chiyuv to help the animal. So it must be that it's not Doraita. The guy, you said that if the guy's not helping you, you could say, hasta la vista, I'm not helping you anymore. So what does that mean? And the fact that it's contingent on the owner helping you, that means that we're not necessarily assuming that it's Doraita of the animal suffering. The Gemara says, no, maybe you can say Tzar is Doraita. Misara patur legamre. Maybe who said you're completely patur? Maybe you said that rather you're unloading, you're no longer chayav to do it for free, but now you're able to charge him for payment. I mean, the Torah teaches you as follows: if the owner is helping you unload the animal, you have to do it for free. If he's not helping you, then you could charge him money. And therefore, it will be the right. Siman, behemat, ohev, sone, ratzan. You can learn these things as follows. Lema Mesiah is bringing a proof for Rava, who said that it is doraita, the suffering of animals. Behemat oved kuchavim metapelba. Someone, if you see the animal of a goy suffering, you have to unload it. Kehemat is just like a Jewish one. Makes sense to say that the suffering of animals doraita, that's why you have to help it, no matter it's a Jew or non-Jew animal. But it's not the right, then why would you have to help it if it doesn't belong to a Jew? Gemara says, no, the reason why you have to help it, even though it doesn't belong to a Jew, is because we don't want to create hatred between the goyim. We could prove it as well, because the Bretta says, if the animal had wine on it, it's asur because the wine is yain nesach. En zakukla, you don't have to unload it. If he holds not the right, that's why you're in the zakukla. But if it was the right because of the animal, who cares what's on the animal? Mar says, maybe that's true. True, in the case of wine, you can't load it. But maybe if it's the right that's suffering, if it's on already, you need to unload it, then maybe you would have to do it. It's not a good proof. Okay, Tashma. The animal belongs to a goy, Yisrael, and the item on top of the animal belongs to a Jew. The pasuk says, "You shall refrain. You may refrain. You don't need to help the animal." If it's the right to not let the animal suffer, how can you not help? Azov ta'azovi ba'ileh. The pasuk should have instead been written over there. The pasuk should have done that you should certainly help. So we must see that it's not the Doraita. Remember, it says Olam tzara chayin Doraita. It is Doraita. Hatam b'te'ina. Over there, it's talking about loading it. That's why you're patur to help the goy. The Gemara says Ihachi imasef. The second part of the verse says Behmat Israel. The animal belongs to the Jew. Umas over kochavim, and the burden load belongs to the goy. Azov ta'azov. You shall help him. V'b'te'ina. If it's talking about loading, amay azov ta'azov. Why would the pasuk say helping? It should be saying your patur, where it says Mishum Tzara Israel over there because the Jewish guy is suffering while waiting for the animal to get loaded. So also in the first case, if the animal belonged to the goy and the stuff belonged to the Jew, you should also help him. The Gemara said no. In the case of the first case, when the cargo belonged to the Jew but the animal belonged to the goy, since the animal belonged to the goy, we assume the goy is the one driving it, and therefore we don't care about his tzar. In the second case, the Jew is the donkey driver as well, because it says animal and the goy is load. Therefore, you have to help him because the Jew is the one suffering. Umay pasakta, who says that you can establish this because the animal belongs to him, that therefore he's the driver. We go, the guy follows his donkey. Yani, if your donkey is being used to use the traveling and the loading, you can assume that the driver is the owner. But both pisukim of not helping and helping are referring to unloading, not loading. So why would the Breta about to bring this pisukim for unloading? Okay, good proof. This Breta holds it's not the and that's why you don't have to help. Tashma, oheb lifrok. If someone's animal is lying and it needs to be helped, but its own and and the enemy's animal needs to be loaded. Right? So your friend's animal is under pressure to be unloaded, and the enemy animal needs to be loaded. Mitzvah you have to help your enemy's animal to load it. To conquer your Yisahara, to prove to yourself and make yourself and change yourself with your hatred for this guy. That's like, if the suffering animal is Doraita, you should be helping your friend to unload because the animal is suffering. Gemara says, not a good proof because maybe it could be Doraita, but the thing is, you should still fight your Yisahara, that's why it's more important. Tashma, Sunay Shamru, Sunay Israel. When we said it's an enemy, it's referring to a Jewish enemy, but also not a goy. If it's Doraita that they're suffering, who cares what type of enemy you're talking about? Gemara says, it's not talking about the pasuk enemy. It's referring to Asanei Matitinkai. It's referring to the case we just mentioned now in the Braita, in the case of which animal needs to be loaded, which animal is not be loaded. Therefore, the current Braita that we're talking about is teaching you that it depends on who's standing there and who's suffering. And therefore, if the animal needs help or not help, it all depends on the situation at hand, like I mentioned earlier, of it conquering Yetzirah. Tashma, let's bring a proof that it's not Doraita. Suffering is not Doraita. Rovetz, the pasuk says the animal's lying down. The load of sign. I can't be talking about a case that the animal always lies down. Otherwise, you don't have to help it because that's what it usually does. The pasuk says Rovetz also lying down. Not that it's still standing. It's still standing. Let it figure it out. Tahat masao, it's struggling under its burden. Not where it's unloading. It's already unloaded and you need loading. And Tahat also teaches you masao also referring to that it had to be carrying a burden that it was already able to carry. But if it was overloaded, you're not chayav. Unloaded. If it's talking about the animal suffering, who cares if it usually lies down, if it doesn't lie down, if it's standing and not standing? Who cares what the scenarios? If it's suffering, you should help it. If it's doraita, good question. Yeah, easy answer. We don't hold at that case because that's Rabbi Yisrael. Holds not it's Rabbanan, not doraita. Hachinam is that we can prove it as well. The Brita said that it's under burden, which means we say that the Brita brought down the reasoning that only if the animal is carrying a load that it should be carrying and not overloaded, and that's according to Rabbi he holds that, and therefore we could prove that's Rabbi Yisrael. When we can we see that the Brita really holds like the second part of the Brita says, it's suffering under its burden. Not where it's already unloaded and needs to be loaded. What does it mean it's unloaded? It's saying it's not, you're not your patur not to help him unload it at all. You shall help him load it. Meaning that you don't have to unload it for free. You should get paid. Hachamim hold that you have to unload it for free. And sorry, and then charge to reload it. That's not Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbanan hold that against Rabbi Shimon. So how can you say that Bertha is a country is seemingly holding like Chachamim who hold that you have to get paid to reload it? But the ina regarding loading, several like Rabbanan, he holds like Chachamim that you have to get paid for reloading it just against Rabbi Shimon who holds it for free. So when you see a donkey lying down because of his burden, maybe you see it 2 miles away, you have to run help it. It means when you meet up with it, meaning only when it's close to you. But if only mentioned when you meet up with it, only if you're walking by it, like very, very close. There's always mentioned you have to see it. There has to be a balance of seeing it at a certain distance. What type of seeing vision has a meaning? It's a close or far. It's referring to a measurement of 1 in 7.5 of a meal. Is a definition of a ris, it's a few thousand feet. Once you clock with your eyes the animal suffering, that's when you're chayav. Tana the Berta says, after you help the animal load it, you should walk with him a parsa length to make sure that it doesn't fall off. You can get payment for escorting the animal for that distance. Mishnah. If you have someone sees a lost object and his father's lost at the same time, your item takes precedence over your father's. His item and his rabbi's item. Again, you take precedence. If you have your father and your rabbis, your rabbi goes first. Your father brought you to this world, but your rabbi is bringing you to the next world. But his father is a Talmid Chacham, his father goes first. Let's say his father and rabbi are both carrying stuff and both need help. You should help your rabbi first. You have to then help your father. If his father and his rabbi are both in captivity, you should first redeem your rabbi, sorry. Then you redeem your father. His father rabbi, but his father goes first. Then you help your rabbi. How do we know that you go first before anybody else? Marav Yehuda Marav Pasuk says, "Efes kilo yebecha avyon." Make sure you do not become poor. Means your financial concerns go before anybody else. However, whoever is very strict on this, he always puts himself first. Will end up becoming avyon bar minan shalom. If a person is very machmir, I have to worry about myself before I become poor. Pasuk says I shouldn't become poor. If someone always puts himself financially first, then he says that the rabbi says that person will become poor because Hashem wants people to go above the letter of the law, right? Whenever you help someone else, you will never lose, and therefore a person should always make sure that he goes and puts other people in front of him. Otherwise, has shalom, he'll suffer from the same thing that he's trying to avoid. Amen.